Welcome back to Reform Millennials, a podcast where we discuss the intersection of markets, politics, and pop culture. Please remember that the content of this show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing should be considered financial or tax advice. Please consult a professional before you make any investment decisions. Mel, welcome to my office.
Thank you. I love this office.
Well, thank you.
I'm happy to be here, jealous that it's yours.
Well, I didn't do anything to get this thing put together, but it's nice to have. I appreciate you coming in. It's nice to do this in person as well.
Yeah.
For the last 5 years, I've done a year in review predictions podcast, and then I throw out a newsletter. And I'll usually go back and audit and review what I've done. But I think it's going to be more fun to talk about the year differently with you. Having the conversation with you every 2 weeks has really improved my view in terms from a macro point of view, because I have an understanding of the political impacts and where things are headed. That couldn't have been more true this year, I think. We're having a sense of the Canadian political moment improving returns. So many people probably don't know this, but Canada had drastically outperformed the United States this year.
Oh, wow.
The TSX is on fire, up 25+% this year. Unbelievable year. That is largely off the back of new political expectations. The fact that we now feel as though we're moving in a direction that is different than before. And as a result of that, you see multiples improve. People are betting on Canada again. That's a view that if you felt as though we were going to get a different outcome politically, you probably wouldn't have taken that bet. So from my point of view, it's really, really improved my understanding, especially locally in Canada. I mean, for first 10 years of my career, America has been the most important thing. You have the lion's share of growth happening there, and that's been the right thing. But it seems as though, and I'm not saying the tides are changing, it feels like Canada's starting to focus again. Now, that might not be how our predictions play out, but it did feel like the market started to price that in, that belief.
Yeah.
So for me, 2025 was an amazing year for Canada in terms of improvement. I felt as though going into 25, we were destitute. It felt challenging. You could see changes on the horizon because, I mean, prior to that, we had Justin Trudeau, who had effectively, or I think in November of 24,
Well, Freeland did her whole letter
Right.
early December. It was like a whole
Yes.
chain reaction of things, but yes.
So you could see it he was on his way out.
Yeah.
But who was going to come in and replace him? What was Mark Carney going to be like? And I think we have answers to all of those things. And surprisingly, Mark Carney has really caught me off guard in terms of how he was going to govern, where he was going to land on the political spectrum, in terms of how he treated the old guard of the Liberal Party and where he's pushing the party today. And I think that has really benefited the country. And so from my point of view, things have gotten a lot better from where they were previously. And I mean, absent of the big story in AI and all the CapEx that's happening there and what's likely going to come as a result of that, I think that we are better situated to deal with the uncertainty and also rapid paradigm change, technology changes that we're seeing. We're better situated to deal with that than we were just a year ago. And that's how I've approached or viewed this last year. So for you, how do you see, and this is kind of where I want to head with regards to this conversation. I want to talk about where we're headed politically. I want to talk a little bit, obviously we have three things that we're going to talk about specifically, but we all have we have our own predictions, but I want you to set the table for what's coming in 26 politically, US and Canada, if you could.
So it's hilarious because speaking of predictions, if you had asked me, and actually I'm pretty sure I'm on record in many areas saying that I thought Mark Carney would actually never pursue the leadership of the Liberal Party, because I just thought this is somebody who's been so successful in the private sector. They don't need the job. And being in elected office these days is perhaps one of the worst jobs that you
Yeah.
can have if you have other prospects,
Mhm.
unless you have that really higher level calling and really do have this desire to make change. And for somebody like Mark Carney, I definitely feels like Canada has more hope. Not necessarily more hope than we would have had if it would have been a Pierre Poilievre prime minister or what have you. But I think that period of the decade of Trudeau chipped away at Canada in ways that we didn't notice as it was happening, and then noticed all at once, I would say, beginning post
frog in
2021.
boiling water.
Yeah. So I think that was jarring for a lot of people. I think a lot of people attributed some of what had happened to Canada to perhaps COVID. But I think for people who have been watching over the past decade, there's a pretty clear drip in policy that led Canada to be in the position that we're in. So I think that when I look back at 2025, I see from a political perspective a bit of a correction happening. And I think that'll feed into some of the predictions that we have for 2026. This sort of craving of moderation that people want, but maybe don't necessarily know how to get from their political leaders. I see, from a moderating perspective of the Liberal Party, it feels that way. We'll see if it actually unfolds in that way. I see, interestingly enough, shifts in the electorate across Canada in terms of changing viewpoints on things that, like immigration, for example, where we've had a consensus, or so we thought we had a consensus on for a long time. I see things that would absolutely get you canceled for even thinking about them becoming mainstream. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing necessarily, but I do see, I see the electorate knowing that the status quo and feeling like the status quo isn't good enough, but maybe wondering where that's going to bring us. We have in Canada, we don't have a majority Liberal government right now. I think that in 2026, we will operate as a majority Liberal government. I think it's possible that we see a few more defectors to the Liberal Party from the Conservatives and other party. And so I don't think that we are at risk of an early election at all. I do think that when we look at the United States, we've got almost 1 year of Trump 2.0, this new era of economic policy, of foreign policy, in terms of how the Trump White House sees themselves in the geopolitical sphere, which is a very important sphere, especially for markets and the economy. And I don't know that in the midterms in late 2026 that we are going to see the kind of correction that myself and others perhaps thought would happen in January when Trump took office. You saw a lot of the policies that Trump brought out right away in terms of tariffs, in terms of economic policy, and in terms of foreign policy. Many people are thinking, let's just hang on for the midterms and then things will change. Trump's approval rating right now, I think, is hovering around 40 or so percent. I think that there are problems being exposed in his coalition, but I also think that if you're sitting in front of your Bloomberg terminal, you're also not super disappointed either. I mean, so I think there's a lot of complexity that's happening there. I think what happens in the next 12 to 18 months on the Dem side and who they decide to put forward for their sort of next leader will have a big impact on what those midterm elections look like in October. But
I want to double click on a few things.
Yeah.
You'd spoken a little bit and talked about his coalition staying together. What does that mean necessarily? His approval ratings hovering around 40 is fairly typical. Biden was around the same thing. So was he. I don't think Obama was much different either. The reality is that after a year, you get a little bit tired. And especially when you're as loud as he is. From a foreign policy perspective, how do you think he's performed? And going into midterms, which tends to be market-wise very volatile, a very volatile year specifically. How do you think that he's going to be able to keep the pedal on, or his foot on the pedal, with regards to what he accomplished in year one and what he's moving forward and preparing to do in year two? Is it, and there's two questions in here, I think. Does the coalition push towards trying to secure re-election or their re-election, or is he going to be able to push forward with what he's done from a foreign policy perspective and continue with his foot on the gas with a moderate approval rating?
Well, I guess that sort of depends. Presidents are afforded the ability to be elected on foreign policy terms if a lot of the other things that are happening in the country, including affordability and sort of those basic level things, are taken care of. I would say that, we've talked a lot about this over the past few months on this podcast, but a lot of the sort of gains on the American side of things have been for the more sort of owners of capital, like bourgeoisie class, right? And so I don't know if the everyday American has experienced the same gains. In fact, I would argue they have not. But
we have the big, beautiful bill that starts funding the country again. That is going to be incredibly stimulative.
Yes.
So that is going to change maybe some people's minds on things. It'll be interesting how that ends up supporting the bottom, call it 50%.
Mm-hmm.
But I know a lot of market participants are saying, okay, we got picks and shovels, AI trade's gone a million miles. I mean, we're going to see a correction for sure. While also realizing that there's a huge headwind with it being a year for a re-election with the midterms. So we're probably going to see a down year after 3 great market years, or 2.5 great market years. I think people need to understand just how big this bill is and how stimulative it is. I think he's banking on this working. That should take care of a lot of his domestic policy. I'm not sure how you view that, but...
Well, you're right. I think that the interesting thing that it's sometimes hard for Canadians to think about in the United States as well is because they have a greater level generally of patriotism and love of country, foreign policy, even though it's not maybe the most important thing to people, is definitely important to Americans in a way that Canadians can't appreciate. Yes. Yeah. And that is really because Americans, I believe, self-actualize through their identity as being American. And there are, like it or don't, the American flag, the Constitution, serving in the armed forces, the idea of America as a superpower is very important to many Canadians. And I think that for those reasons, Americans do care about foreign policy. But, part of it is sort of a catch-22 because part of what made America that way post-World War II was its involvement in different theaters around the world. And Trump has really signaled this desire to not have that kind of involvement unless it's going to be good for the United States. And good for the United States is in the eye of the beholder as well, in terms of what kind of a country that you want to have. I would say that there's a few different arenas that I'm looking at in terms of how Trump acts. His relationship and sentiment towards China has been slightly surprising to me. I definitely thought that we would have, I think they were talking about this on All In actually, just more of a hawkish approach to China than he has had. And we don't know, maybe that is part of the strategy of how he's going to deal with Russia. Maybe that is what he believes is a bigger threat. We don't know all of the things that they're sort of thinking about, but I'm definitely looking at that China relationship, that Russia relationship, particularly as a Canadian, because I think that is, we're not to Sarah Palin, but like many Canadians can see Russia from, way up north. I hyperbolize a bit there.
Yeah, obviously.
The Middle East, he's done some amazing things with. That was more Trump 1.0 in terms of the Abraham Accords, but that continues. Normalization in the Middle East with Israel and other countries is, I think, a key factor, especially if you believe some of the forces there have an impact in the West, which I think they do. And so I think that when it comes to how he approaches things in 2026, I'm going to look at how is America able to maintain its global hegemony without being the world's policeman, I think is what I'm going to be looking at. I would argue that you can do that if you have the economic power behind you. But I guess we'll see in terms of how that rolls out.
I mean, Elon Musk cut a lot of soft power when he started cutting all these programs.
Yeah.
Areas where they're feeding money into places to control them without having big ships and a military base there, right?
Well, and just to play devil's advocate on that front, I talk about this a lot. When you're going to spend money on something to try and build leverage, if you only spend money 50% of the way to actually make that make sense, then you might as well not spend any of the money at all. And I think that it would be tough for the United States to argue that it's competitive in that sphere when looking at how China has executed that same strategy with its Belt and Road initiative. So, I mean, there is an argument to be made that if you're not going to be competitive in the spend and the approach, and if you can't catch up in that way, then perhaps you're going to try another avenue to exercise that kind of soft power, which, I mean, we'll see if that works. China's taken a soft power approach that I think more and more people, we could do a whole episode on China, are starting to realize is an exercise of desire to have hard power. So,
I mean, that's always been their thing. They're the engineering state. They build things, whereas it's much less the case with regards to the United States. It's almost as though they've exported their culture via Hollywood and via media, less so than they've done with the building of roads and infrastructure, right? That's the two countries are so similar yet so different in many ways. In our notes here, we have consequences of good, bad will be harder to ignore. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, and then I'm going to I'll give my view. It's an interesting view because harder to ignore good and bad. It feels as though all we've been doing is paying attention to that. But so maybe tell me what you mean.
So I think that if you believe in free markets, which I do, Adam Smith, when he wrote Wealth of Nations, a lot of people don't realize that he also wrote a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments to go along with it. And so when he talks about the way that markets behave, he's also talking about how people behave in many ways as well. And I think that if you believe in that sort of free market, individuals make choices that are either good or bad. And, a market economy works best when those decisions are not insulated. Again, for anybody who wants to be a hater, I recognize that a perfect market system doesn't work, and there's obviously going to be externalities. But generally speaking, I think that a free market economy works best, and free market ideas and a free market society works best when people are able to experience the consequences of their actions, whether they are good or bad. And I think that to organize those consequences in such a way that is unifying for a country, there have to be some organizing principles, which I think the United States does a decent job at in terms of like nationalism and pride and a sort of ethos that can bind a lot of different types of people together into one organizing idea. But I think that one of the consequences that I think particularly Canada is in is that we don't want anybody to experience anything too good or too bad. And I think generally speaking, when this comes to healthcare, I think that's a good thing. I think it is a very good thing that if you live in Canada and you need heart surgery, it's not going to bankrupt you. And I think that we should do what we can to maintain that. But when it comes to the capitalist realm, I built a company, I sold it, there is a sense of like, thank you for your service, but we don't really want you to experience too much of that good. And I think it also happens in the reverse of that too. If you make certain decisions that put you in a certain place, I think Canada doesn't really like embrace the idea of consequences. I think that consequences in relationships, in the economy, at work, are what drive us to be better and drive us to find alignment with the things that are for us. And I think to wrap this point, we have an aversion to accountability a little bit, I think, in terms of like how we deal with people, whether we want to be accountable for the decisions. And I think we're almost afraid to fail. And I think that part of the amazing thing about the United States is that they don't see failure as final, right? There's an entrepreneurial, and Alberta has that too, I think. There's that pioneer spirit of like, put one foot in front of the other and keep going. And again, I would like to reiterate that I don't mean that we should not take care of people. I really believe in compassionate conservatism. But I do think that if you're going to incentivize people to really hit it out of the park and deter people from making decisions that are maybe not going to be the best for them or in alignment with them, whatever that is, we do need to remove some of the cushioning, I think, that keeps something between people and the decisions that they make.
And it's your view, and I think this is how I'm hearing it, that is going to start, there will be sharper consequences both directions. The incentives will start to be more apparent, and maybe it'll allow for us we'll remove the proverbial ceiling, and we will make the floor a little bit colder. And I'm hopeful that actually occurs, because I think it's somewhat what's missing. I mean, you show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome, where we have moderate upside incentives and you get moderate returns or moderate outcomes. Same thing on the bottom end, where, I mean, you have very moderate consequences for doing something bad. And as a result, you get more people doing those things, or just doing it over and over again. And I think you don't have to extrapolate far to see what we're saying. I tend to hope for that to be the case. I would also say that if you were to then extend that into culture, I'm hopeful that we get an expansion of how we view people's behavior online, the way in which that I don't know, it seems as though people are doing more extreme things to get more attention. And I just don't think that that's going to get rolled back. I think it's only going to get worse. So I think there are some downsides to some of this, because I don't believe culturally it's a great thing that we have the clickbait incentive.
No.
People behave in ways in which I think they're going to regret as a result of the short-term benefit from making bad decisions. And I think that that's only going to continue. And I think that that actually kind of rolls into like one of my predictions for this coming year. And it's that the continued destruction of Hollywood. We have a Netflix that has officially won, I think, the streaming war. It's over. And many people have thought Netflix wins, Prime loses, or Disney loses. And that is not true. Who loses? You end up seeing the old media houses of the past, Hollywood, die as a result of this. America's largest and most important export, with the exception of their military, is their influence on the world's culture. And I believe that and maybe this isn't the death of, I think it's just the brand of Hollywood that is going to be, that is toast. It's shifting from the power that the houses that were managed by the families and to being democratized across creators on YouTube, creators in the podcast realm. And as a result of that, the media landscape is going to continue to accelerate and change. You have this large separation where you have the old franchises of Disney, Mickey Mouse, Avengers, etc., that have never been more valuable. Same thing with HBO, with it being sold or theoretically bought for $30 a share or whatever, either Paramount or Netflix gets it. I think Netflix is likely going to be the winner there. That aggregates, puts everything in the hands of Netflix. But what they're likely going to do is just monetize that content and continue to charge you more for what you're getting. But the actual impact and creativity that came from those houses is very likely to disappear for a period of time, until because like all things, you have a pendulum shift.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this pendulum shift to the point in which I think Hollywood has become very much irrelevant. We don't have successful releases anymore unless it's Leonardo DiCaprio doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat depressing. So as a result of that, I also think that you're just going to continue the acceleration of YouTube's impact, the democratization of content. It's commoditized effectively. And that also changes, and I think this is something that you were going to mention, but the impact of expertise
Mm-hmm.
and the acceleration of AI slop. And if you don't have a better filter for what's real and what isn't real, I think a lot of people are going to have this, that Dunning-Kruger chart
Mm-hmm.
where you become an expert within one article that you
Mm-hmm.
read on a subject. It's not much different than you prompt,
Mm-hmm.
we'll call it Gemini or ChatGPT, to learn a subject or to find a fact. And now you're an expert on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't really realize until you've really dug deep that you don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really become enlightened for
Mm-hmm.
years. And the unfortunate reality that I'm viewing here is that the democratization, the loss of gatekeepers in media is going to continue to erode away fact, reality. But what it also is going to do is going to give those that have that in their specific fields superpowers. And this is my secondary prediction, though. Hollywood, the death of Hollywood, but then also the biggest losers of AI being young folks that are at the peak of that Dunning-Kruger effect.
Mm-hmm.
They are not going to be given the chance to become enlightened and
Mm-hmm.
to truly grok an idea
Mm-hmm.
and understand a profession, because there's no longer that first rung is now out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cost to train a young person, a junior, a somebody who is not quite valuable, you're paying them 80, 100 grand a year or 50 grand a year, whatever. But really what you're training them to do, and they always had box checking jobs. They don't have that anymore because AI can do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Those tools have removed the need for those positions. But as a result, they have no way to jump onto that ladder. And it's going to become a cultural issue where we have a generation of 20-year-olds. And we came from that generation where it was already starting to become more and more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see it in the US with unemployment for university grads. It's inching up. It's almost at 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And 7 years ago, it was 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to be a big problem
Mm-hmm.
moving forward. And I think it's an opportunity for large companies to recognize that this is going to be an issue, invest in young people, because in 15 years, people won't have that core group of employees.
Yeah.
But I think all of these things kind of merge together where we have AIs coming in. It's going to remove an entire layer of the employment class. And we won't recognize the impact for 10 years probably. And it's going to impact politics. It's going to impact our culture.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I think it just continues to accelerate some of the things that I think you pointed out when you suggested the consequences are going to be good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's such a good point. And I think, we were talking about this before we started recording, but I think this is really pointing to the importance of character. I think that even when we started to come of age in our early 20s, there definitely was this, you can call it late stage capitalism, where there's almost a perversion of the relationships that we have economically to be just profit driven. And while we do need to be concerned about profitability and value and inputs and outputs, part of what we just experienced as millennials and many generations have experienced is you just learn things that you're supposed to learn on the road to becoming a human and the road to self-flourishing and developing socially, psychologically, by doing hard things and doing things that suck. I think I used to always use this phrase, and maybe I'm just projecting because I worked for so many years as a server, but it's very apparent to me when I work with people, the kinds of people who proverbially have never cried in a cooler. you know? And I think it's like, again, to my earlier point of consequences, I don't want you to cry in a cooler because I don't want you to be sad. But there is something that happens inside of human beings when they go through challenging times that makes them better humans. And I think that collectively as a society, that does something to societies. We talked about this a couple of podcasts ago, and just in terms of the role of adversity, but I think that's part of what AI is taking from younger generations. It's making intelligent, smart, effective people unstoppable and average people invaluable.
Yeah.
Unvaluable.
Like,
I'm using the wrong words, but
effectively they're just prompting something and then throwing out the slop and checking a box. And
yeah,
that's not really a valuable thing to deliver for somebody.
And I think that to your earlier point in terms of the democratization of content in YouTube, I think all of that is great. That's why you and I are able to sit here and like, hopefully a couple of people will watch. This would not have been possible 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's a great thing. But the issue, I think, is the way in which it gives people the illusion that greatness is easy. Greatness is never going to be easy when you are actually becoming great. And it doesn't matter how much money or technology or tools or employees that you have. If you want to be great at something, the path and the steps that you have to take are always going to suck, largely. And I think that by telling people that technology is improving your standard of living and all of these things, that is great. But there is something that we cannot leave behind in the becoming if we want to continue to be collectively great as a society. Grit is important. Work ethic is important. Character is important. And I do believe that if we're talking about pendulums, we are going to get to a place, if not in 2026, for sure in 2027, where people are craving and actually can recognize true greatness and excellence in people that is not AI generated. And I think
it's funny.
It's coming.
I completely agree with you on this. The one unique, because I think unique, individual, authentically created content is going to skyrocket in value as a result of what I'm not dubbing this. This is a large majority of the stuff that's being created is sloppy and garbage. And I think one interesting difference in perception of AI is that what most people don't understand is that what's produced for the individual is directly produced for you. I don't know what AI is serving you. I don't know what you don't know what AI is serving me. Yes, exactly. But I mean, when you're using the tool itself, it's serving each person their own individual serving or their diet of what it's perfectly curated for them.
Yeah.
It's similar to my Netflix home screen is going to look different than you. And it's made for you. The same thing is true for AI. And this is a big Girardian theory where human beings crave community. We crave that social aspect. And for us, the ability to create a form or piece of content that people can talk about, perhaps agree with or flesh out or talk to others about, I think is going to become incrementally more powerful and more important moving forward, because I know that you have consumed that and now we have something in common. Whereas AI does have a major impact on the creation of media. It's going to change the way we think, what we think about. However, from a consumption perspective, it's going to become more important to have similarities, to find that commonality between friends and community. So those that perhaps feel as though it's not worthwhile, I think should think about like I can't remember whose idea this is, but 1,000 True Fans.
Yeah.
Your community is incredibly important, and it's only going to increase because the value you can drive from a small community is actually only improving. So I don't want to sound all doom and gloom with regards to the changes that are happening. Perhaps it's better that Hollywood dies and it evolves into something new. But the reality is that this is occurring, and you kind of have to go to where the puck's going, so to speak. And for me, I think that directionally, folks should just understand that human beings haven't changed.
Yeah.
It's just the houses that have dominated our world are shifting, and there's a big paradigm shift on way, and you got to recognize it to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and what you're driving at is really just authenticity, right? And I think, as I go along, 2025 was a big year for me for this personally, but I think that society is feeling it as well. You don't have to be for everybody. And I think that the more that you can align to what your beliefs are, being curious, the things that you're good at, the things that you're well disposed to, and be accepting of other people who are doing the same for themselves, I think that's really what connects people to one another. Like, I can get along with people who are so different than me and diabolically different in terms of their belief systems, as long as I feel like that person is coming to that belief system from a place of authenticity and not from a place
and kindness
of virtue, and kindness, and not from a place of virtue signaling or like using morality to trade in for status. And I think that will have a little bit of an equalizing, that will disappear a little bit more as we go through.
So I want to change gears a little bit. I wrote a post on LinkedIn. I used Nano Banana to create the artwork for it, which I feel like is going to lose it's not going to be cool at all within about 15 minutes. But it's called the messy middle. And I think what has worked well portfolio management wise for me and for a large portion of the market has been to invest in the AI picks and shovels. What does that mean? You're investing in the energy cycle. So nuclear ideas worked incredibly well in 2025. The commodity sector, gold, silver, did incredibly well. But more specifically, the NVIDIAs, the Microns, the semiconductor plays have been the large winners in 2025. And I think this has been incredibly important. I was actually having a conversation with Brock about this last weekend. And we talked about the impact of the reasoning portion of your AI and its shift from being just like raw, fully trained intelligence to actually being able to iterate and think. And that is made a massive difference. And the reason for that is that it's now going to be able to be deployed, and we can now finally go up the value stack in terms of where this can be delivered inside of our economy. And prior, it effectively was just a better search engine. Now it can reason, it can think, and you can iterate on it. And as a result of that, you can train it and implement it into your businesses. And when I say the messy middle, where I view this as improving, and it's already being shown. It started showing up in Facebook's advertising algorithm has gotten so much better as a result of its ability to iterate and learn on your actions, the way in which you interact with your app. But it's moved into trucking logistics, where these trucking companies they'd send a truck from Denver to Detroit, and 60% of the time or 40% of the time that truck would return back empty. But now they're able to find more customer load to move back, or their trucks are now full more often. And as a result of that, their profitability is going through the roof. We're becoming more efficient. We've thought that this was going to be delivered and become more efficient, but it's actually starting to show up. You're seeing better margins in sales. You're seeing faster ordering times. Nobody's been able to deploy AI better, robotics better than Amazon has over the last 15 years. The way in which they were able to view a problem, solve it and everybody else ignore it because it was too hard or too capital intensive is going to be the exact same thing that occurs over the next 3 years in the lion's share of this market. And I actually think, interestingly, that this benefits Canada a lot. This benefits Mexico a lot, and obviously the United States, as it always does. It's going to be harder to find these because they're not top of mind. These aren't things that you see digitally. It's not going to be just like right in your face.
Well, they're not cool.
They're
either.
not.
Like, this is the other thing, is like the messy middle. The boring jobs make the most money. Like, I bet you, compare, I'm just totally pulling a couple of ideas out of my hat here, but like Instagram influencers that do really well for themselves may be shocked at like what somebody who owns a chain of laundromats does for themselves.
Completely.
And that's not cool.
No, it's not. And, it's kind of nice to see a return to that.
Yeah.
I think that's what Canada's built off of. We are not flashy. The United States is. For the last 15 years, we've optimized a new business model. That business model was sales as a service, or really low margin or high margin, but cost of goods sold, very low software. And that created this belief and these multiples of equity that had never been seen before. And what we're moving back to is a much more capital-intensive business, a more capital-intensive investment cycle. And this is actually great because what it does is it opens up new opportunity for different types of jobs. Interestingly, the next 10 years is likely going to benefit the tradesman more than it's going to benefit the white-collar worker. And that shift is a good thing. It's, well, maybe not a good thing, but it's healthy. And it's just, we're going back to doing hard things that require engineering talent that you have to grab. And AI is going to largely benefit and make these things more top of mind and more in focus for the next 1, 2, 3 years, probably further. So a big prediction for mine will be this rotation from financials and what I would consider to be like hardware, semiconductor tech doing incredibly well in 25, 26 and beyond. I believe we're going to see real improvements in the messy middle, the difficult businesses that perhaps are overlooked or have been overlooked for the last 15 years. And that paradigm shift is actually a good thing. And it's going to be, interestingly, benefit Canada more than I think anybody's willing to admit.
Can I say one thing on that that's not exactly what your point is, but I want to expand on it? I think there's an argument as well to be made for like the marvelous middle when it comes to like human beings and how they're working as well. I think we've gotten to a point where like everybody wants to like create the cool robot, be the YouTuber with 10 million followers, or everybody wants to be like exceptional and amazing and super cool and different because we're constantly exposed to those ideas, and we forget that there's a whole bunch of just normal people in the world that are able to find happiness by just being average. I think that we should, if you are a person who wants to drive for excellence, I think you should do that. But I don't also think that you should like flagellate based on the fact that like you just want an average life. I think that we've really made people feel like crap about themselves because they just want to have a normal job, live in a normal house, and have a couple kids. And I think there is something exceptional about that life that I think that we need to start encouraging people to look at a little bit more. And I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to be excellent. I want to be excellent. I think you want to be excellent. And I think that's great. But I think also not at the expense of like those middle, boring, normal things in life that are really the path to happiness for most people.
No, completely. It's okay to be normal, or you don't have to be famous and flashy.
Yeah.
I would love to see a return to our society rewarding that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think it's on its way. Interestingly, we are suggesting that it's going to become, or the drive for hits or for followers will probably become more extreme. However, it won't be the value won't I don't think be conveyed the same way. I don't know that this is true, but I'd be willing to bet that smaller following businesses are starting to generate more revenue than those that have 1 million followers. And if anything, that democratization and that spreading effect where the money is now no longer, okay, Kim Kardashian has 400 million followers. Of course, she's able to build Skims and do all these incredible things. But further down, you have a number of people with 1 million followers that probably aren't able to generate as much revenue via their funnel as somebody maybe with 3,000. And it's all dependent on the business that you sell below it and the life that you live. Yep. And I think if we were to focus more on not the amount of followers that you have, but rather the good that you deliver, I think, interestingly, you'll be happier.
Yep.
You won't be as addicted. I believe that sort of touches on my robotics prediction, my idea that the center of the market, the messy middle, is going to be this robotics push is going to be where it really affects. I can't imagine how much better a trucking delivery service will be as we move towards self-driving. I know that this has been I went back, looked through all of my predictions, and self-driving has long been one of them. But I actually think that at the end of this year, people building houses are going to stop considering 4, 5, 6 car garages as we move towards a world where we have less need for individuals' cars, unless you're ultra wealthy. I've been saying this a few times.
Who's currently considering 6-car garages? I need to hang out with some more rappers. Clearly.
Yeah, no one around here. But this is my big prediction. Maybe not starting this year, but the year after. But I really think that the only people that are going to be able to drive on their own will be the ultra wealthy, and it'll be driven by the cost of insurance. So. The reason being is I think people are pretty aware of this now, but human beings are crashed significantly more, especially the more we're on our phones, than a Waymo does or an Uber does. This, to me, was the biggest reason why Elon Musk supported Donald Trump in the 25 or 24 election, was his ability to then push through the regulatory approval of self-driving cars throughout the United States. It's now just going to become a federal approved ability. That likely doesn't happen under a Democrat-led executive, So I think that the horse is out of the barn on that one now, and we're starting to see real success. I mean, if you look at the map of Waymo's up Western United States and now creeping into Canada, it's only going to start moving east. And I think that's going to have a really big impact on our culture. It's going to have a really big impact on, my generation of males are probably going to be the last car guys. I think it's kind of over for that. Maybe you're seeing it differently. I have my brother couldn't care less. He's 10 years younger than me. Couldn't care less about cars. I think that there's a big cultural shift there, and I think it is now just starting to accelerate. So this wasn't really on there, but I do want to get that out there. I would love to have someone who's an expert on insurance come on this podcast, and you will be able to talk to the policy more so than I probably will, because I don't know if you've probably discussed this with some of the people outside of a public setting, but I think in Canada, we're starting to see a change or Alberta, we're seeing new policy changes around insurance because it's a massive impact on the average person's wallet share. It is getting incredibly expensive to insure. And I mean, maybe I can get you to expand on this later, but I think that is insurance specifically is going to become a field that's changing very quickly. And if we are going, as you say, and then this is kind of a transition to extremes before moderation, you have this belief that, and I don't want to steal your thunder here because I want you to bring this up, but from public to private delivery, it screams public and then going private more so than insurance. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit and where you see Canada moving, because I don't know how we're going to move that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. The reason why I think that we're moving to the extremes, and I didn't say to the right or to the left, but I think that people
totally
are going to become further entrenched, and frankly probably need to become further entrenched in the extremes before we can moderate. This is sort of blending one of the predictions the other predictions I had. But I think that we can, as a society, make decisions when we get a nudge, when we get a shove, when we get a push. Sometimes we need to be struck quite hard before we realize that we are headed in a direction that is not serving us. Now, it's kind of can be problematic to understand what that point is when you don't have a consensus on where it is that you're trying to go or what your values are as a society. And so that that in and of itself, I think, can be problematic. But I think that we are going to have a period over the next few years where the status quo cannot stand. You are going to get sort of lost in the shuffle if you don't have an opinion or a perspective on things. Now, I'm not saying that you need to share those perspectives or opinions, but this idea of like, no, let's just keep going the way that we are, based on the signals that we're receiving from the United States, from their national security strategy, based on economic signals that we're receiving, based on societal shifts on topics, that is actually not an option. And so I think that the reason why we're going to go to extremes before we moderate is you're going to have to pick a belief system and either be proved right or wrong on it. And I think that I would rather decide that I am going to align with the belief systems and perspectives and assumptions and predictions that are most likely given hundreds of years of human history and how humans interact. And I think that there are people who are going to be maybe upset that believing it doesn't make it so. But I think we have to go through that period of extremism. I don't want to go through that period of extremism, but I feel like it's already happening, in order for people to understand how you turn a ship, an inch in the wrong direction and you end up fundamentally in a different place. And I think that that's going to be unavoidable. I don't necessarily think everyone has to be a pundit or like comment on things, but you do have to think about what kind of a society that you want to live in and what your hopes and dreams and goals and desires are, and decide what's going to serve you socially, politically, economically, and go forward committed in that direction, and we'll see where things land.
So I think you're right in the US. Do you really think that that's the case here?
In what way?
In Alberta, specifically. I feel as though we're moderating slightly. Maybe in the short period, and perhaps on a more, like you zoom out a bit, we're still directionally becoming more extreme or more.
I actually don't think that we're moderating quite yet. I think that we are homogenizing a little bit in beliefs. Like I think that Alberta is a very unique scenario in Canada because people in Alberta are generally very pragmatic. And so I find that a lot of people say that you voted a certain way or believed a certain thing 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago. People in Alberta are very willing to say, okay, well, that's not working anymore. Let's shift. And so maybe it just seems like things are moderating because things are homogenizing a bit. Like maybe we are all just sort of more directionally going in the same direction.
It does feel like our province moves together.
Yeah.
A lot better than most any other.
Yeah.
So,
and that's pragmatism because
okay.
people, and again, I actually think that that's because in Alberta, we have a history of not separating consequences, good and bad, from people's actions. And so that goes back to one of my first points. I think that you're, rewarded for hard work and success. And we don't try to leave too many people behind, but we also don't, incentivize people to not want to be their best selves.
So I want to kind of just a rapid fire from you.
Okay.
I'm going to start in Canada, then we'll move to the US with political predictions here. I think I know the answer to this, but how do you view the Conservative leadership vote going?
I think Pierre will win that vote. I think that it is becoming increasingly difficult to see how the Conservative Party won't make a change. That's not my personal opinion, but if history is to be an indicator, we're not very kind to people who don't give us immediate electoral successes. And so I do think Pierre will come out okay in that leadership vote. I'll be there. We can maybe talk about it on the podcast. But I think it'll be a difficult road to maintain for him.
How does the Conservative Party start to form a new identity, given that it feels as though its legs have been cut out from under it because Mark Carney went copy-paste?
The biggest thing for the Conservatives, and Carney, I don't want to say stole because I don't care. I'm just happy that policies are being advanced. Be happier. But Carney took a lot of ideas that Conservatives have been talking about, a lot. If you cross-examine the platform of Trudeau in 2015 or 2021 to the platform that Carney had in 2025 and how many of those ideas came from the Conservatives, there are a lot of them. I think that the biggest challenge for Conservatives is actually not moderating on policy. It is on comms and how they communicate it, and finding a way to communicate to the electorate that the Conservative Party is about a disposition on how to make decisions, not specific policies, because that is really where the Liberals win, is they just do politics better than the Conservatives do. Because the Liberals, sorry to all my Liberal friends, but Liberals don't really have principles in the same way that Conservatives do. Liberals see themselves as the governing party of Canada. They see what's good for their party is good for the country. And Conservatives start from first principles more. And I personally like that, but I'm also cognizant of the fact that that's not always an effective electoral strategy. So how they communicate and how Conservatives probably need to be a little bit more shameless, to be honest. We could take a page out of the Liberals' book on that.
Okay. So zooming into Alberta, I think this is going to be a very interesting dynamic where I'm less bearish on the pathways. I think that is a brilliant, we'll call it carrot, that has very clearly shifted Danielle Smith's approach. But I also believe she's lost a scapegoat. And as a result, there's going to be more focus on the files more close to home. Less us against Canada or us against the federal government, more what are you providing for us locally? And if she loses that scapegoat, which I think I'm very, like I said, optimistic about the path forward for TMX expansion and then an additional pipeline west, plus the Carbon Capture Alliance project from Fort Mac to the Cold Lake area. I think that those things are likely going to happen. And if they do, she's lost her scapegoat, because that's what we want. That is exactly what we wanted from our federal government, was to allow for these things to occur. We want the tanker ban shift. All of that stuff it seems opened up. If they hit their targets, like I think April target for a plan to be delivered, if there's approval, then July or something like that. If that occurs, she's lost her scapegoat. What comes into focus here?
Well, that's assuming that the federal government follows along the path that they've set. There was a vote in the House of Commons earlier this month, Conservative motion put forward about the MOU that Liberals voted against. So I choose to be optimistic that this is headed in the right direction, but I'm also not naive to the fact that, it's an MOU. It's not happening in real time.
There's no shovels on the ground.
Exactly. And I'm going to be optimistic. I'm not trying to be a hater, but
pretty hard for them to say no to the Pathways projects, though.
I really hope that it happens and it moves forward, and I think it'd be a good thing. So I guess my answer to your question is that they will still have somebody to criticize on all of those sort of
but
small
if she's
milestones.
being for lack of a better word, a poopy pants about it, just constantly talking about things that maybe haven't happened yet, I'm just going to be like, okay, just do something.
Yeah. So she's not, to her credit, like Smith has been actually very collaborative with the federal government and like super, I think has shown incredible leadership on that file and many other files as well. I think that you're correct that people are going to become a little bit more focused on, I'm assuming you're talking, healthcare, education, those types of things. I think that this will go back to the question of sort of consequences. I think that can and will be a focus. I mean, to be clear, the provincial Conservatives have not cut education or healthcare over the term. They may have not increased it to inflation and population growth to the liking. We obviously have capital and infrastructure needs that require significant investment because they've been ignored for many years. But I do think that part of the argument that Smith and her team will have to make is we are on a good path with some of these energy prospects and possibilities, but we don't have that money in the bank yet. And so until we do, we are going to have to make some choices. And even though Albertans are conservative, I call Albertans, conservative in name only, right? Like Conservatives really do want and need and appreciate their entitlements. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think we need to be open-minded to the idea that if we want to build a world-class health system and education system, then we are not going to have absolutely everything else. Like user fees may go up, your access to certain things may change. And so I think it's like we are not in a position to be checking every box and giving ourselves a blank check. And again, choices, trade-offs, scarcity. That is what makes an economy round. And I think that's what, in 2014 or 15, I think it was, Jim Prentice, whom I worked for in his premier's office, got in a lot of trouble for saying, we all have to look in the mirror. And we do.
We weren't ready.
People were upset about it, but it's true. Yeah. And maybe if we had, we would be in a different position. But anyway, that's revisionist history. But
it is very much so. Moving down south. Actually, first, I want to talk BC very quickly.
Okay.
How do you see the drama unfolding there in terms of, it seems as though their premier's in hot water, so to speak.
Yeah.
But truthfully, could another party ever win over there? How do you see the politics evolving in BC?
Well, BC is, contrary to many people's opinions, got a similar tilt of politics to Alberta, while the Lower Mainland is loud, population dense, and the island is very NDP. It's a largely, like if you looked at a map of British Columbia, there's a lot of blue there, and there's a lot of working class people there as well. And not to mention the ways in which the Lower Mainland diversity has, immigrants are generally not progressive. Immigrants are generally conservative. A lot of the immigrant populations that we have in Canada, at least, for religious or cultural or other reasons. So I do think that there is a pathway. I mean, they're going to be going into a leadership race with the Conservatives there. And I think that there is a space for a pragmatic, conservative individual to lead that party, some of whom are friends of mine. And I think that people are open to that. I think that Carney's going to really shift the game in terms of what it means to be centrist. And I think that if a leader that's progressive but has those conservative values comes in, there is a pathway there. And I think that that it's possible for sure.
That would go a long way. Heading south, the midterm elections, what I've noticed in the US specifically, I've seen a few significant losses for the right in whether it be mayoral races, etc. And yes, they're in they're Dem strongholds, but nonetheless, a shift. You have the midterms coming up. Do you think that they're going to lose the their control over the three houses come midterm elections?
No.
Interesting. Okay. Why?
I think there's the economic argument to make for sure. There is also the sort of cultural argument to make and the sort of like East versus West civilizational divide that I think that we're talking about. And I think that's going to become a growing concern for people in terms of, are we going to elect and ask for our country to be led by people who want to put our cities, our states in the direction that we believe America is aligned to? And is there a viable alternative for the Dems? And I think that the people who are going to be in that race, if you have a race that's like Gavin Newsom, AOC, Mamdani types, and I know Rahm Emanuel is also looking at a win, but if you have like a Rahm Emanuel type cohort where there are pragmatic people that are going to be running on the left, then I think you have more of a path. If, again, extremes before moderation, if the people that are running on the left are just sort of like a different version of, of Kamala and Bernie Sanders and like that crew, then I think that we'll see more of the same in the States. But if there's a shift, then maybe. But I don't know if that shift is going to happen.
So I have a wild prediction that, and maybe he doesn't put his foot forward yet. I think he could wait another year. But Jamie Dimon's contract is up in July of 26. He has $2 billion in capital gains. If he runs for president, he doesn't have to pay that. I can't imagine a world where he loses.
Okay, here's what so now that would be amazing. Like if you
would run as a Dem.
100%. Like this is, and have you noticed a big shift in his social media as well? I'm like, Jamie Dimon is everywhere. And he's got a lot of stuff to say that I really enjoy. Just about culture, and he's obviously built a great business. Or not built a great business, but managed a great business and being very successful. He arguably has, that would be amazing. That would be so amazing.
Definitely a centrist.
Yeah. So yeah, if you have and I'm just talking out of my butt here now, but like if you have like a Jamie Dimon, Rahm Emanuel ticket, I think people can get on board with that. My dream ticket for the United States is Dave Portnoy and Taylor Swift, because I think that Dave Portnoy is like an underrated American treasure. I have to tell you, like, I love this guy. Like, truly, he should run for something. Are
you just getting to know him though?
Well, I had this like sort of aversion to what I thought Barstool Sports was, and just judged it.
What it was is probably right. It's changed.
Okay, well, I love Dave Portnoy. Dave Portnoy is pitch perfect on all of his takes. Like, I swear to God. And he's just like a cool dude. He's like cooking for the holidays. He's supporting women.
So he has shifted.
Well,
Barstool Sports
I like was where built he shifted.
Was built off the backs of like college culture.
Okay.
And it's not. Barstool Sports of 2008 is not the same as 2025.
Okay, well, I like this.
So it's very important to understand that there was a massive change around COVID.
Yeah.
Where they've become more mainstream. They took on they got purchased, bought, and they had to become more corporate, more aware of what they were saying and doing. They've now changed tune, which I think is for the better. All of those things are good. They have the biggest podcasts in America. Like they're clearly doing very well. Taylor Swift, there's no way, but
I know there's no way,
but like no chance. But I do like just the thought that there could be a change, a move away from what I would consider to be like the new democratic. It feels as though they haven't really thought through what culture is looking for, and they keep force feeding these candidates that no one wants. And I don't know if that's necessarily true with Buttigieg, because I think that there is a side of him that I think represents politics properly in that party, but he doesn't have a chance for worse reasons. And Gavin Newsom, which perhaps does make sense, but he's just in the wrong state. So I'm interested to see where the Dems go. I think they have an opportunity. There are candidates out there that could work. Because right now, the Republican Party is stable in that Donald Trump is still powerful, but he's done. And he's a lame duck president that perhaps can live on, but he's not coming back for another term. So who replaces him in that party? There's a big shift coming in the United States politically with him on his way out. And we probably don't feel that until 2027, when you're like, oh, it's actually really soon now. And now you have the primary that becomes like front and center, and he's not in it anymore. It's a world that we don't even know. It feels as though my entire adult life has been, since I was 25 years old, has been Donald Trump dominated.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have JD Vance, who probably looks at running. You'll have Rubio, like you'll have those types of folks. And honestly, it'd be interesting to see if there's anybody that of the names that we discussed that decides that they want to run as a Republican and
That's fair.
change the party from the inside. I mean, that's a huge task, and I think it would just be easier to run for the Dems and do it on that side. But there's some perspectives and point of view and coalition building and within that party that it may be easier to build within the Republican Party as well. So personality may be a bigger deal than party when it comes to like the next iteration of who runs things in the United States.
That's very true. I'm not sure if you have anything else, but
No.
I think I've touched on most things. I like to always end. I actually am ultra optimistic about where the market's headed. A lot of folks can throw out a million headwinds in terms of what's coming, but one big beautiful bill, massive capex from all the big seven, it all trickles down. I know a lot of people don't think that money trickles, but it absolutely does in markets. And we're going to see a shift. Interestingly, I view the opportunity in Europe to be fairly interesting. Europe is going on a spending spree. They're cutting rates. Don't fight the Fed. When they're cutting rates, what has happened for the last 25 years?
Just don't become somebody who wants Canada to join the EU.
I don't.
Otherwise, I might need to stop doing this podcast with you.
I would never want that, honestly, as somebody who understands the Albertans' push for their separatism. I still love being Canadian. I don't identify culturally with Europe more than I do with the United States. And some people might not think that to be approachable or digestible, something for me to say, because it's just like so polarizing to still like the United States because of the tariff thing. But I believe that we're much more similar to them than we are to Europeans. And I hope that that identity resurrects itself, and that we can get over that period of 3 months. So I don't know if anyone's noticed, but what tariffs?
Yeah.
Like there's a few, but what ones? And he just laid out two interesting, like, hey, your dairy industry, and what was the other that he wanted to have struck in? Oh, the alcohol.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are not that big of a deal, people. What are we, like he signals and says the wrong things, and he's brutish, but if you just think past it, how do we want to be enemies with the United States? It's not directionally where we should be headed.
No.
So
I'm optimistic too. I believe very strongly in the power of individuals and the power that individuals within a community that is committed to being productive and kind and looking out for one another and just building stuff and being curious. I think there's immense power in that. And so I would just encourage people who maybe feel discouraged about what's going on in politics. I think there are so many different ways that you can get involved in your community and be part of like being the change you wish to see in the world. That's what I'm going to leave us with. I think that politics is incredibly accessible, more so than you think. Getting just a little informed, getting just a little involved goes a long way. And I think that you'd be really surprised as to like the very low barrier to entry to shifting and changing some of the institutions you may or may not love at the moment. And I would encourage people to do that because I think it matters.
I like that. Well, that's a good end. Merry Christmas, Mel.
Merry Christmas.
Look forward to chatting with you in the new year.
Yes, awesome. Good to be here.
That's all for today. Thanks for listening. If you found this valuable, please subscribe and share it with a friend. As always, the information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial and/or tax advice. please consult a licensed professional for your own personal situation. Joel is a registered portfolio manager and investment advisor, and clients of his and his firm may own securities discussed on this podcast.